Hey guys, it's Austin here with Out Jeeping. In today's how-to, I'm going to be showing you guys how to replace ball joints in your Jeep's front solid axle. Alright, so before we get started, we want to make sure we have the proper tools for the job. So right here, I basically have a $50 ball joint press that I purchased off of Amazon, along with the right adapters for a solid axle for Jeep and Dodge. And you're going to want to make sure you get this because this makes it 10 times easier on getting the old ball joints out and putting the new ones in. So with this adapter kit right here, it's about 45 bucks off Amazon. There's another kit out there that's basically the same exact thing that's for 90 bucks that everyone recommends, but I went and got the $45 one and it seems to work just fine. And I can say that because I actually done the job and it's future me talking right now. So basically with this kit right here, it has 4 different adapters, and what makes it special is with this angled one right here, because when we're pressing in the new ball joints, they go in on a little bit of an angle and we want to straighten out that ball joint press when we press it in so it all goes in straight. So this is the key point, but we're going to end up using all of them when putting in and taking out the old ball joints. I'll leave a link in the description below on where you can find this press and this kit so you can buy it for yourself. As far as new ball joints, I went with Spicer, which is actually Dana, so these are OEM ball joints and they should last a long time. This Jeep that we're doing it has about 290,000 miles and it's probably never had its ball joints done, so it's about time to do it. So let's get started and I'll show you how to replace them. So just to give you an idea on how bad these ball joints are, I can take the whole wheel and move it back and forth like that. And I noticed this during the last time I rotated these tires, and it's not coming from the wheel bearing. You can actually see the knuckle moving back and forth with the C's on the axle. So that tells us that the ball joints are really bad on this. Another thing I noticed is that the inside of the tire is wearing a little bit more than the outside, and when I rotated the tires last, the ones that were up here were looking pretty bad. Alright, so what we're going to need to take off is obviously the brake caliper, the rotor, and then from there we're actually going to remove the whole unit bearing and axle shaft assembly as one piece. It just saves time, that way you don't have to deal with this nut for the axle shaft. So we'll do that. We're going to start off with the brake caliper, and depending on what year your Jeep is, it could be a 13 millimeter, 10, or 12. This one, it's going to be a 13. Set this caliper where it's not going to be dangling from the line. Then we got our 3 bolts on the back side that are holding on this unit bearing, and they're going to be a 13 or ½ inch 12 point. Alright, so our bolt's going to look like that, and as you can see, the head is a 12 point. These ones came nicely off because I had this off during the summer because I had to do new U-joints and axle seals on this Jeep. So everything's coming off pretty smoothly. More realistically, if you haven't had this apart, it's probably going to be more rusty, especially around the bolt head. You might have to hammer on a socket or something like that, because that's usually what's going to happen, especially if you live up north in the Rust Belt. Alright, so now with all the bolts out, we can take this unit bearing out, and it's going to be pressed in a little bit. And there's many techniques on how to break that free. One of mine is actually just taking an old hub bolt, one that you're not using for the specific job, because we're going to actually put this in the back, thread it in a few threads, and then hammer on this bolt, which is going directly to this unit bearing, and then it should pound it out. And we're going to do that on all 3 of the bolt holes, that way it comes out evenly. So just thread this on the back side, and you want to make sure you go in a few threads, that way you won't mushroom the actual threads in the unit bearing. That way you won't be able to put the bolts back in when you're reassembling it. And then all I'm going to do is just take the hammer and give it a couple whacks. Alright, just going to give it a little tap like that. And now we should be able to pull out the unit bearing along with the axle shaft. You want to be careful when pulling this out, that way you don't damage the seal that's in the inside the axle. That wouldn't be good. Alright, so now we can begin to remove the knuckle from the axle, and to do that we got the 2 nuts that go to the upper and lower ball joint. And before we take those nuts off, we actually have a cotter pin that's holding them together, and most of the time it's going to be really rusty and it won't want to come out, but you gotta try to get the best you can. Sometimes if it doesn't come out and it's just stuck in there, you can snip off the ends and then actually start to unscrew it with the nut, and it should force its way through. Alright, so those cotter pins weren't coming out, so I just snipped it flush with the rest of the nut on there, and I'm just going to power through it. So I'm going to start off with the top one up here, and that's going to be a 7/8. So I'm going to stick it up into this hole. It fits it right over like that. This thing's going to spin until it stops. Alright, that's the top one. And now I'll switch over to the bottom one, and that's actually going to be a 1 1/8. And this one's a little bit more tough. Yeah, so I ended up having to heat this up, and the impact actually didn't have enough juice to get it. Well, part of the reason is because this is a 12-point socket and there's just too much rattling around for it. And if it was a 6-point, it would have nice firm points of contact, and I'm sure it probably would have gotten it. But I heated this up and I was able to get the cotter pin fully out by just picking at it with the wire cutters, so I eventually got it. So now this nut is coming out. Alright, so now with the 2 nuts off the ball joints, the only thing holding this together is just the friction of that tapered shank that the ball joints sit in with the knuckle. So the best way to get it out is take your biggest sledgehammer and hit right on the knuckle, and hopefully it should pop out. So now we can take our knuckle, move it to the side if we can. Looks like it's caught up on our steering, so we'll just leave it right there for now. Now we're going to go and take our ball joint press and fit this up. First we're going to remove our upper one, and then we're going to remove our lower one, and then for installing them we're going to then do the lower one first and then the upper one last. Alright, so when you do this on a solid axle, obviously you're going to need the correct adapters to be able to remove this, and basically that includes all 4 of these pieces. I'll put a link in the description below and where you can find this, but mostly it's because of this one for installing it. It actually has an angled piece to it, that way when you go and press the new ones in, they'll go in nice and straight. But for removing, we're basically going to take our biggest one that has a chunk missing out of it. We're going to put that right on the top here. And then we can take our little small piece, and that's going to fit right down in this little area where their clamp is. And then we can go and back this up all the way. Alright, so now we can start and tighten this up, and hopefully our ball joint will come out. And this is going to be a 7/8. If you do have room, like on a lifted vehicle, you can obviously take the impact and it will go a lot faster. And you gotta be careful on some ball joint presses. Some of them actually won't allow an impact. It'll actually crack or damage it. So you gotta make sure you can use an impact on the correct ball joint press that you have. So it starts getting tight. You can take a hammer and start to hammer the surface around here. And as you can see, it's popped free. So we'll keep going. All right, there you go. And we got our old ball joint. All right, so now for removing this lower one, we're going to be taking our big piece again and actually fitting it on the bottom here. Then we're going to take our small piece and then fit it on top. That way it's going to press out downward. So I had to jack it up a little bit more. That way I would have some room down here to be able to use the press. And this thing is going to be in the way for a little bit, but hopefully you can still see. All right, with that situated like that, we can go and tighten it up again. There it goes. Yep, it was definitely time for that one. So now I'll go and clean up these holes and then we can get ready to press in the new joints. All right, so now we're going to start off with the lower one, and I'm actually going to remove this rubber boot for the install process. Like so, and then just take a little bit of paper towel and just get around this area so it doesn't get too messy, because we're actually going to be using this surface to press it in. So I'm going to stick that right in the bottom. I'm just going to give it a couple taps just to hold it in place while we're getting our clamp set up. So now to install this, we're going to use this other piece right here, this thin wall that doesn't have any notches in it. And then we're also going to use our angular piece. And with this angular piece, it has basically a thick end and then a thin end. And on the thick end, it actually has a little groove in there, indentation. And we want to make sure that indentation is towards the outside when we install this right on top here. So that way the thickest part is on the outside and then the thinnest part is on the inside. We'll fit this under and then put our clamp into place. All right, so with that lined up right there, we can go and start tightening it up. You can see it goes in nice and smoothly. If you didn't have this tool and you just had a standard ball joint press, you would have a heck of a time trying to get it in there straight. I know the last time I did this, I absolutely hated doing ball joints because you had to shim it up with a piece of metal and it was just a nightmare. So go and snug this up. Right there is good. All right, so with that pressed in, I'm going to go and take the rubber boot I took off before. Just put a little more grease in there since these aren't greasable. You want to put as much in there as possible. And then we can fit our boot back on. All right, so now we can install our upper one. I'm just going to set it in here. We don't have to remove that boot at all. And I'm just going to tap it in just a little bit to hold it into place. Right there. All right, so to install this upper one, we're actually going to take our little piece and stick it right on top of there, and that shouldn't move because it locks into that ball joint. And then we're going to take our angled piece again and then stick it on the bottom here. And since this has a hole in it, it's going to stick right through, and then our press shouldn't get in the way. Now once again, for this angled piece, we want to make sure it's pointing towards the outside. Now we can go and press this in. Snug that up, and then we can go and release it. So along with new ball joints, what comes with it is we got this little collar insert that's tapered, and this is actually for the bottom one down here, and it's supposed to thread into the knuckle on the bottom. And you can replace it if you want. Otherwise, I mean, This one's pretty rusted in there, and I don't feel like possibly getting this out, so I think you have to use a special tool on this too. So I'm just not going to do it because I don't see any need for it. So I'm going to go and bolt this back into the axle. All right, and then we can take our new nut and then thread them into place. So then when tightening these up, you just want to snug it up, nothing crazy tight, and then line up the hole where it would go for the cotter pin. So that one just lined up perfect. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the top up here. And we got our new cotter pins. And stick them through the hole and then bend them around on the opposite side. Fortunately, this one in the back got into a tight spot because it's directly up against this front part here, but we just got to bend it around. And basically these cotter bends help prevent the castle nut from backing off, and it'll keep it nice and tight. All right, so that's that. Now we can get ready to basically put everything back together. We got our axle shaft and hub assembly, and that should just go straight in, and then tighten up these 3 bolts, and then our brake rotor and brake caliper. All right, so we want to put this in and not try to hit the end splines in the dirty pipe here, because we don't want any dirt getting into our differential, because it could damage our seal and the gears and bearings inside. And if you do still have the dust shield, obviously that's going to go in between the unit bearing and the knuckle. But this one, they're all routed out, so we're just going to install it like this. And then we can take our bolts, and I like to put a little bit of anti-seize on there. This I already had it on there, but I'm just going to put a little bit more. All right, so I'm going to tighten this up a little bit on each one. That way it sucks it in evenly against the knuckle. Alright, so now I'll take our rotor and pop it back onto place. Then we can take our caliper and then fit it in the groove on the bottom. Then take our bolts and thread them back into place. Alright, so before I put the wheel back on, I'm actually going to go and grease up our zerk on our upper ball joint. The lower one does not have a zerk at all, unfortunately, so I'm just going to do the upper one, and then while I'm in here, I'll do all the steering components. And you'll see that boot get all expanded, and then a little bit of grease should pop out. And that's when you know when to stop. So a helpful tip is don't use your Milwaukee impact to torque these down all the way. I learned from the other side that actually they were on too tight and it wouldn't come off. It totally stripped out, so I had to drill out the wheel stud. So I'm just going to do this just to snug it up a little bit. It's on the first setting right now. And then I'll go and torque it down with a breaker bar when it's on the floor. So as you can see, it wasn't really too hard of a job to do at all, just time consuming, and having the right tools for the job makes a huge difference. Because the last time I did ball joints, I didn't want to do it ever again, because I basically had to pound it in with a sledgehammer since the ball joint press wasn't working because I didn't have the right adapters. So getting the right adapters makes a huge difference. So I hope you guys learned something, and make sure to like and subscribe to the Outshipping YouTube channel to help keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next video.